Online advertising can have a lot of different success metrics, whether it's sales, leads, page engagement, just social engagement, followers, what have you. But one of the things that always happens with online advertising is that you're generating some sort of brand awareness every time you're running ads. You're sending your ads out in front of users who probably haven't seen you before, and you're introducing them to your brand, to your company, to what you do, all of those different things. But it's kind of hard to measure that impact because one user might see one impression, read it, understand who you are, and maybe decide to work with you. But there could be other people who scroll past countless ad impressions and never actually register who you are or what you do. The good news is that there is a tool that can help us track this on Facebook. It is the brand survey. Basically, it's little questionnaires that show up and ask questions to users who have seen your ads before and help you understand if your ad campaigns are making a positive impact. So in this video, I want to walk you through all of the setup sections of the Facebook brand survey, and then we're going to talk about a couple of best practices as suggested by Facebook. To set up a brand lift study in Facebook, we first need to navigate to the experiments portion of the interface. So it's going to be over here under the big menu, and then we're going to click experiments. On this page, Facebook will prompt you to set up a couple different types of tests. There's an A/B test, which will be saved for another video. But for now, we're going to use a brand lift study. This is where we will poll the audience to measure the impact of your Facebook ads on your brand. The key metric here is going to be brand lift, and I do want to talk about the definition of that really quick. Brand lift is the estimated difference in the number of people who gave the desired response to your poll between the test and the control groups. It does say this metric is estimated, but effectively this is going to be the difference in the number of people who have seen or engaged with your ad before and gave a positive response to your survey questions, which we'll go through here in a minute, and the control group who did not see that ad or did not engage with your brand in any way. So the goal here is to measure the difference in users who actually have seen your Facebook ad versus those who didn't, but the baseline needs to be those who did not see your Facebook ad and what their engagement with your brand is. The lift that you will see is only the difference between those who did and didn't see your brand. That's what we're trying to measure here. So for next steps, I'm just going to go ahead and click Get Started. When setting up a brand survey, there are basically two key sections that we're going to work on. The first is the test details. That's going to be this box up here. And the second is going to be the poll questions, which we'll go through in a little bit. But the first thing we get to set up in the test details section is what would you like to test? This is effectively trying to narrow down which portion of your account you want to measure brand lift for. This is honestly a really cool thing that we can do on Facebook. You can choose whether you want to measure the impact of your entire account, which is what this defaults to. You can choose a campaign group, which we'll go through here in a second, or a specific campaign. When you're thinking about the brand lift that you have in place, maybe you really only ran one specific campaign that you want to see the lift for, or you ran a series of campaigns, or you're just trying to measure it for the entire account. You can customize what level within your Facebook ads account you're measuring the impact for. I think that's pretty great. So like I said, it'll default to the account level. Basically, is my Facebook advertising creating a lift in brand awareness? The second option is to create a campaign group. So if I click on this, we now have a little bit of customization. So we can choose the campaign group name, which is a name that you can customize. If you want to name it your holiday campaigns or webinar campaigns, whatever it is, name the group based on the campaigns you select, and then that's the next step. You can come down here into campaigns. If you click into this field, you'll see the campaigns that are eligible to be added to this campaign group show up. This account, quite frankly, has lots of different campaigns, but there are only two that are eligible. But let's say these are the two that I did want to test. I could click next to both of their names and add them to this campaign group, and now my test will only measure the brand lift for these two specific campaigns. If you want to use just one individual campaign, you can click the campaign dial here, and then you'll be brought back to that same list when you click into the campaign field. So if I wanted to measure only the impact that this awareness campaign was having, I could click on that, and it'll be set and ready to go. For now, I am going to revert back to the entire account because there's a different setting that I want to have here. You can see the account name is in place, which we do have to blur out. I'm sorry for that. But there's a different section down here underneath page that is different when I have the entire account selected. In this Facebook ads account, we are eligible to advertise for 2 different pages. So if you do have 2 different pages or 2 different brands here, you can choose from the drop down which one you want to use and add that, and it'll measure only the impact of that page on the brand lift throughout the account. So again, this is pretty customizable. I'm sorry all these brand names have to be blurred out, but you can at least see how you can customize this lift study a little bit better. Next, we need to choose the region, and right now it's set to North America. This account specifically and all the campaigns in it only ever run to the United States, but the settings here are going to be pretty broad. You can change it by clicking the pencil, and then you can click the drop down. You'll see North America, Latin America, Europe, Middle East, and Africa, and then Asia Pacific. These are the only options you have. So again, this is very high level, pretty much broken down into continental groups. So as long as you've got the right one selected, you'll be all set. Next, Facebook would like you to choose the vertical that your business fits into. Right now it's defaulted to other because that makes the most sense for this account. And it kind of automatically knew what was going to be there. But there are lots of different options. Agency, automotive, e-commerce, entertainment and media, gaming, marketing, professional services, travel, nonprofit, luxury, whichever one makes the most sense. Categorize your business so that Facebook knows where you fit in this group. I don't think this is going to have a big impact on the surveys themselves and how this test delivers, but I do think it's something to where if Facebook starts to share any sort of benchmark stats, anything like that, it will categorize you into your specific vertical or industry to make sure that all the stats it's giving you are comparable to the industry that you're in. Next, you need to choose a start and end date for your brand survey. And with this, I'm actually going to start to talk about the best results box that's up here because this does impact the schedule that you would set. First, Facebook says that your test should run for at least 14 days. Ideally, you'll have it run for 2 weeks. Right now, the schedule is defaulting to 2 months. So if you go with the default range, you're going to be all set. The next thing is that your account total budget should be greater than $30,000 for the duration of your test. This account spends more than $30,000 each month, so I think that the 2-month setup here is going to be the default range that Facebook will always opt you into. But when you're choosing the duration of your test, the start and end date, make sure that you anticipate spending $30,000 over that time frame. In this example, I could spend $15,000 a month and still be done with my $30,000 by the 2 months that it has here. But if you are going to run your test only over 14 days, you effectively would need to be pacing for $60,000 a month, or you need to spend the $30,000 just one time in those 14 days. So make sure that your start and end dates consider that you need to have $30,000 in spend for your test duration. One small thing to clarify here is that the $30,000 just needs to be your account budget, what you are going to spend. This is not in addition to what you were already going to spend, like a Google Ads brand lift survey. Those are ones where you have to spend specifically a certain amount of money on that campaign and dedicate it only to that campaign. This is not that. You only need to be spending it in your account to be eligible for this brand survey. The next suggestion Facebook gives is that your creative should contain your brand name or logo. Ideally, your stuff is probably already containing that, but just something to make sure that you've got in there. And then lastly, your campaign's audience should include people older than 18 because surveys will not be given to people who are under 18 years of age. Now that we're done with that, the last thing we can do in the test details section is to give your test a name. So name it something that makes sense to you, whether it's based on the entire account, specific campaign group, a specific campaign, maybe an individual page, whatever it is, make sure that you have a name that makes sense to you so that you'll know what it is when you come back to it. The next section is going to be around the poll questions themselves, and these are going to be how we actually measure the lift that we're seeing across our target audience. The first thing you get to do is choose the language. So it's going to default to English US, but then you do get quite a number of different languages that you can utilize. So pick the one that your target audience is going to be using. Now we can get into the questions themselves. So poll question 1 is going to be a standard ad recall type, and this question is required. You will always have to use this specific question and the different settings in it when you are doing a brand survey, and then we can customize a little further on. So the question itself is down here. And then this is going to be the question. Do you recall seeing an ad for your page name online or on a mobile device in the last 2 days? So the your page name is going to be determined by whichever page you selected in the test details. And then you'll notice that a couple of these are drop downs that you can choose from. So you can customize the question to do you recall seeing? You can change seeing to either watching, encountering, viewing, or reading based on the ad messaging that you're using or any of the videos that you have available. And then you can customize the second set to do you recall seeing an ad for? You can change the language a little bit to do you recall seeing ads for, a post about, a story about, or a video about, and then it'll still have your page name after that. So if you do want to customize it, you can, and I'll just show you down here in the poll preview. It will change if I choose to a post about. It changed the language down here, so now you'll see the full preview of do you recall seeing a post about this page online or on a mobile device in the last 2 days. Unlike some other brand surveys that are out there, we cannot customize the answers. All of the answers for these surveys are going to be preset. So the answers here are either yes, no, or not sure. Pretty straightforward. Now I want to jump up into the guidelines for selecting your polls. Aside from this poll question number 1 that is required, you can select up to 2 additional poll questions to test. We'll talk about the different question types here in just a second, but Facebook encourages you to choose the polls that are along different stages of your marketing funnel to get a full picture of your brand effect. So at this point, we're just trying to measure ad recall specifically, but if we want to check out the additional question types, we can add up to 2 additional questions, and here are the different groups that we have. We can add up to 2 additional questions, and we can see which types we have by adding a question and then coming down a little bit so we can see everything, and then poll question type. If we click from the drop down, we get the type and then an example question for each of them. So the first is standard brand awareness. Have you heard of, and then the page name. So if we click on that one, scroll down just a little bit, you'll see that the default is have you heard of, and then yes, no, not sure. But you can choose from the drop down here of have you heard of, have you watched, have you played, have you used, could you select, could you pick out, could you recite. There's a lot of different options that you have available here, but this is again going a little bit back to ad recall. This is effectively, do you know this brand name, which I think a lot of people are trying to get at the root of when they're doing these types of studies. So this could be a really useful one for you, and you can customize the poll question to whichever makes sense. Next, if we want to add another question, we can scroll down here. We got poll question 3, and the next type is going to be abstract favorability. For that one, the default question is going to be, how would you describe your overall opinion of, and then the page name. You'll see down here from the answers, we have anything from very favorable, somewhat favorable, neutral, somewhat unfavorable, very unfavorable. So basically, do you like these people or not? You can adjust the drop down to change into how would you describe your thoughts about, your impression of, your feelings about, or your views on, and then the page name to follow. So depending on what you're promoting, what you're advertising, and maybe even what your page name grammar is, make sure that you customize this to make sense. For the last couple of questions, when I wanted to add a new one to show you the different type, I clicked on a button down here, but you'll see now that I have 3 poll questions chosen, and there's no option to add another one down at the bottom. You're only allowed 3 questions during any of the Facebook brand surveys. So to go through the rest of them, I'm just going to keep clicking the drop down in poll question 3. Next is going to be familiarity, and it's relatively straightforward. How familiar are you with this page? You can either know a lot about, a fair amount, a little about, you've heard of the name, or you haven't heard of it at all. So these are going to be the different options. And then for the drop down, you can ask how familiar, how comfortable, or how acquainted are you with that specific page. The next question type is going to be recommendation, trying to understand if your audience would actually recommend you to anybody. So this one has a few more customizations than most of them, and you'll notice that it starts off with, will you recommend this page to a friend? Your options then can tell you not only what people think about you, but if they're familiar with you, because you do have yes, no, not sure, but then also I'm not familiar with this brand is an option. So you could get a little bit more insight there. But like I said, this poll question is a little bit more customizable than the others. You can choose from either will or would, which could be something that's just based on your grammar preferences. But then you can decide if you want somebody to recommend, mention, or talk about your page. And then you also get, quite frankly, a very long list of people that they would talk to. Will you recommend this page to a friend, relative, coworker, boss, stranger, neighbor, all the way down to partner. So there are lots of different options of how you can customize this recommendation question to see how willing your audience is to recommend you to basically anybody in their life. The last question type is going to be more bottom of funnel, and this is an action intent question. How likely are you to consider this page, this brand name? You can either be very or somewhat likely, neutral, somewhat or very unlikely to consider this brand. But you can change the language as well to be consider, to purchase, buy, pay for, recommend, use, wear, eat, vote for, visit, join, drive, lots of different options of the actions that people can take to engage with your brand. So you can see how Facebook is customizing these questions to try and make sure that it's covering different portions of the funnel. We have things asking around ad recall or brand awareness that are the very top of the funnel. Just, do you know who this brand is? To slightly further down the funnel questions, asking about people's feelings about a brand, or would you recommend this brand? And then lastly, down at the bottom, we're asking about the actions. Would anybody take an action with this brand? Would you engage with them in some way, shape, or form? So depending on what type of information you're trying to get out of this brand survey, customize your questions to make sure that you're going to get it. If you go through this and you've clicked through a bunch of questions like I have, and you decide that you don't want one or two of the questions and you want to simplify, you can come back up to the main line here and just click the X next to the question, and you'll get rid of question 3. And even for right now, I'll just get rid of question 2. So we go back to just having the one question to run with. The last section down here is going to be estimated test power. Right now, my estimated test power is over 95%, which means that Facebook believes that I will get a 95% confidence in my questions, and I will get enough responses to have a good understanding of what my ad recall is because of the length of the test that I have, the number of campaigns that I have this set up for, the number of questions that I have, and the budget that's in the account. If you start to add lots of additional questions, or you narrow down the campaigns that you're using in your account, or you shorten the test, or you don't have quite as much spend, this estimated test power number will go down. Facebook recommends you have a test power of at least 80 before starting the test. So as you're adjusting this, make sure that you're keeping an eye on that estimated test power number down at the bottom. Once you're finished with the test settings, you can come down here and review test details. And here you'll see at a very high level the test name, the account, page, the ad schedule, language, and all of the questions that we're using, as well as Facebook's estimated test power. In the what happens next section, this is important to pay attention to. You can start your test by clicking create test. And if you do, in 39 minutes, basically because of the timing of when I'm creating this, because I've done one of these before and it said 52 minutes, so this will be dynamic. It says your test will start polling your target audience to measure the impact of your Facebook ads. You can come back to start viewing your results in experiments when you've received 250 poll responses. They will email you when your results are ready. So if you don't get more than 250 poll responses, you will not be able to see the results of the test. This is still going back to some of Facebook's privacy information, wanting to make sure that there is a big enough data set to go on that you can't find out any user information and that it's coming closer to having some sort of significance. I'm not going to create this test, and I will be quite honest, I don't have any tests created for a brand survey to show you the results for, so I apologize for that. But when you're ready to, in the way that we were on the experiments page to begin with, you can click over into results, and this is where your results will show up once you have created the test. Like I said, there's nothing here, but you can imagine what it would look like. Overall, these tests are very easy to set up, and I have seen some of them in the wild. They do blend in relatively well into the Facebook or Instagram interface, and they are very impactful when you can start to show the ad recall or the potential actions that users might take and their willingness to do that. Again, it doesn't come back to be as easy as clicks or conversions, but advertising does have kind of that halo effect of brand awareness, and this is one of the best ways that we can possibly measure that, even if it isn't exactly perfect. I would love to hear from you guys if you have any additional questions on how to set up a brand survey, any best practices, or even if you've run a test. I'd love to hear some of the results that you've seen and if you've seen a positive return on your ads. Thanks for watching our video. If you thought it was useful, give us a thumbs up below.
We release a new video at least once a week, so if you want to get notified of when a new one comes out, be sure to subscribe to the Paid Media Pros channel.